guys, it's Catherine Joy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am so excited to be here with my mother-in-law, Lisa Voetberg. And some of you guys may know her, some of you may not, but regardless, this is going to be a treat, and I'm really excited about the questions you guys asked on Instagram because I feel like I'm going to get to know Lisa so much better. So anyways, Lisa, before we dive in, some people might know you, some might not. So for those that don't know you, could you kind of like explain who you are aside from just being my husband's mom?
My name's Lisa. I married Joe Voetberg, and we've been married 36 years just this week. And we have 10 children. Our oldest is 34, and our youngest is 17. And Elisha's our fourth born.
Yes.
Married Katie. And we have 14 grandchildren, which is pretty awesome.
That is.
Yeah. And so I don't know what else. We live in the same town where I grew up. And we have family businesses here, our own family businesses. We have a coffee shop, and then we have a real estate agency, and just love the people in our community. We've always felt real support and encouragement as we raised our kids.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to dive right in with a great question. What was your first impression of Katie?
Okay, this is good. Well, this will tell you a little bit about our family as well. We met Katie and her family in 2001, may have been 2002, but
yeah.
We were at a music camp here in Sisters, Oregon, and the first thing I remember about Katie is that she and Annie, who is our fifth born child, wrestled each other. They had this competitive wrestling match. So my first impressions of Katie were that she was really strong and fun and a really good sport. I love that competitive free spirit that I saw in Katie. And then as she and the girls continued with their friendship, I liked the wholesome good friend that she was to my girls. And so that's Katie in a nutshell. And what I also love about that story is how God directed us just with our music camp situation. That first time we went to music camp, which was a wonderful opportunity for us. It opened doors in music, but it also brought this pathway of the Johnsons into our lives. Grandpa Burnell, Paula, meeting Chad and Janice. It literally changed our lives. Christian fellowship and how we encouraged one another among the families. And so to have Katie in our family was just a bonus. Kind of like, really, we did that all just because we went to God directed us to music camp in Sisters, Oregon in 2001. And I just see it as a God-directed situation that Katie came into our lives.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that situation too, obviously. But I just think that is so great that like we just don't know what decisions we're making. The Lord's actually orchestrating to be so much bigger.
It is true.
That is so awesome. So what did you envision? I'm a little nervous about this question, to be honest. What did you envision for a daughter-in-law?
Well, I don't think you need to be nervous because I didn't really envision much.
Okay, good. That's good.
But let me, one thing that really has been an encouragement to both, to me and Joe, is praying for our children. And I know all parents do this, but we had direction. One of our favorite resources was a resource by John Barnett called The Joy of a Word-Filled Family. And it has scripture-directed prayers. And so in that is prayer for a mate, and even a nice long chapter on what a daughter-in-law might look like or a son-in-law might look like. And so we would go through that, and they were anywhere from, of course, loving God with all their heart to loving children, loving self-acceptance, who God made them to be. And the reason I say not to get nervous, that I don't think there's a reason, is when we pray scriptures, at least it was for Joe and I, it helped us really focus on what was important, almost like a general guideline, and then whoever God brought into their lives, we had the concept presented to us as well that God would direct our children's hearts toward that person or direct it away. It was like opening up our hands to say, God, if Katie is the right person for Elisha, will you direct their hearts toward one another or direct their hearts apart? Make this very clear. Because it's we don't know what God would design or plan for Elisha or Katie, but God does. God knows the perfect thing. And so when you pray those general guidelines that are truth in Scripture, I think it leaves it wide open for the type of person that will be, and what that person will look like, act like, and so there's just real peace in that prayer.
That is so encouraging, Lisa. Like, that's so encouraging. I feel like that kind of describes you and Joe in a nutshell. How I feel like you guys view life is just like with those open hands and knowing Scripture, but not expecting it to look one specific way. And that's just really encouraging, because I feel like we live in a world where it's like, no, this is the ideal, or this is the ideal.
Right.
Instead of just being like, it's going to look different.
Yes, definitely. And that segues into one of the questions.
Yes. You just go right into it.
Okay.
You know.
Of what it's like, let's see, my favorite thing about being a mother-in-law.
Yes.
Because this is a bonus that I didn't anticipate that has been such a blessing. And I would say my favorite thing about being a mother-in-law is the bringing in of new families, new ideas, anywhere from new recipes to how, because people have all been raised so much differently than we were in our family. You have the same core values, of course, you know, of wanting to raise kids that love God, and then love family. But how that all worked out is so much different in each family. And that's been such a beautiful thing, to have input on how maybe families resolved conflict, or how they made something in the kitchen, and the little light bulbs that have gone off to me thinking, wow, that's a cool idea. That's been, and it also, to me, it's a real pretty picture of the body of Christ. We always have that Romans 12 on how the body has different gifts, the head, arms, legs, and how they function. And I think when we have in-laws come in, it really illustrates the body of Christ so well, and can really be a sweet opportunity to grow.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm going to answer, because of that, a question that I just realized was asked to me a few minutes ago. And it says, how did I know that Lisa loved and accepted me? And I just, like, you just heard her heart. And I feel like that's one way I felt very loved and accepted. I felt like she was really open-handed. She wanted what was best for Elisha. And because that was me, because he chose me, I felt she was going to accept me because of that decision. And I just felt she was so confident in God working out the situation. And I just saw that, I guess, that confidence in every area of her life. And so I knew she was confident that I was right for Elisha, and I never felt, belittled or like I didn't measure up, or that she had this perfect standard that I have to live up to. I've always just felt very accepted and very able to be myself because that. And one thing that I also appreciate is I've never heard anything around the grapevine, or through the grapevine, I guess, that Lisa said about me or about Elisha. What I have appreciated is that if Lisa or Joe see something in Elisha in my life, there have been times when Joe or Lisa have made, they've seen stuff in our life and they've called Elisha and talked about it. And I feel like we just, because that, have an open dialogue, and you guys are willing to speak into our lives and to let us know when you suggest we do certain things, or, they aren't like overbearing by any stretch, but like, if they see something in our life where they're like, hey, they have more wisdom, more years, and I really admire them speaking into our life, and I really appreciate
Well,
that.
and to add to that too, Elisha and Katie have such a sweet, teachable spirit that they ask for advice, and I would say most of our kids do. There is this dialogue to ask about child training, or money issues, or homeschooling, and it's a sweet communication thing going on with our older married kids that they want to hear, and it's a sweet way of, I think, for our kids to honor us. And which also, there was a question in there. I'm not letting you ask the questions.
No, you know what? That's totally fine.
Of relationship with mother-in-law.
Job security over here. Yes, that's what we were going to go to.
Yes, the relationship, how to cultivate a good
Yeah,
relationship.
how to cultivate a good relationship between a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law.
Right. And so my first thought was thinking of my own mother-in-law and then my mother. And I think just having that willingness to honor your parents, and that goes over into the mother-in-law situation. And as all the Christian disciplines or the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, it all, I think, intensifies in a marriage, children, and in-laws. But it doesn't go away. Those are still Christian fruits that God would like us to love on each other with. And then I think he gives that extra command to honor our parents. And I really think it's a protection. It's been a wonderful thing for Joe and I to have that direction in our own lives with our in-laws, to really purpose to honor them. God directed us in different ways than some things that our parents did, but I think because our heart wanted to honor, and just to encourage you too, sometimes I think that honor can be ambiguous or not a real concrete thing, but to ask the Lord what it means to honor your own parents, and he'll reveal it to you, because he wants us to do it, and it will look differently in each person's life. But to have that piece of honoring, and then I would say forgiveness, and not take things personally. There will just be things that our feelings will get hurt. It happens on both ends, and to be able to step back and realize that they did not know, those people that offended us, most of the time don't know. And then even if they did, then God's always asking us and directing us to forgive. So it's kind of I think it's an easy thing to have good relationship, if it's easy yet a challenge, like life is. And but God enables us because it's something that he desires. So
that's encouraging. I feel like Lisa just has a lot of grace. I really do, and I felt that. I've definitely felt that as her daughter-in-law. Okay, so we're going to jump into kind of like child training and stuff like that. So how do you encourage children to pursue what they're interested in, but also push them to grow in other ways?
I like this question because when our children were young, I really had a conviction to not put them in a box or label them. And then I also had a conviction, because of good teaching that we've had, whether it be child training books or maybe just exhortations along the way, to always focus on affirming a child's character rather than their appearance or things that they can't control. It's kind of like Martin Luther King's, he wants his children judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Well, I think that's a really good thing for parents. It's easy to say, oh, isn't she cute? Isn't she pretty? Look at those blue eyes. But those are all things that God just gave her, that she was born with. And when we can encourage the character or things that they actually have control of, and right now the popular term is the growth mindset. Carolyn Dweck has written some great stuff, and there are a lot of people that are writing about the growth and or learning mindset, to where you can encourage children to learn and grow, rather than just say, you're so smart, to say, wow, you worked really hard, and you're working really hard, and you can achieve this. And then when it comes to the giftings and the labelings, there are certain things you may notice in your children that they're good at. But when they're young, and I would even say, because we have a 17 and 18-year-old at home now, I'm seeing growth in the 18 and 19-year-old that if I would have just put him at 12 and said he's this way, it would have been an injustice, because he continued to grow, just like I think I've changed at 57, and I continue to change because I want to change. I want to be more Christ-like. And so our children will grow and develop, and maybe have certain gifts that you might not even notice. So I'd really encourage you not to put your children in a box and label them and say he's this way or that way. You might even think you're being positive, but give your children room and learn to grow. And then just on a little side note, some of the kids, especially when you've got working together as a family, certain kids are good at certain things, so you assign them those tasks because you got to get her done.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody's better at outside chores or cleaning or decorating, and so you nail those people and say, you're on it. We're going to get this done. But then during other normal times, challenge those children to get outside their comfort. That child that maybe prefers outside work, encourage them to do inside work, not to just always have them do what they're good at. And you're a family and you're accomplishing things, and that, oh man, that's been wonderful. Which also, not to get sidetracked, but that's having children work is something that I think Joe and I have. We grow and change a lot of our philosophies along the way, other than our standard Jesus Christ is Lord forever, and the solid word of the Bible. But as we learn new things, we'll change and learn. But something that we've pretty much stayed consistent with and felt convicted is to teach children to work. To have a working child, and a lot of people will say, well, that's because you want them to grow up and help you. And that's true, but that's not the reason that we worked with our children. It was to develop a relationship, and that they would also have an intrinsic value of being productive people, because God did create us to work, and He's given us the job to help train our children. And working is just a wonderful way to build relationship.
Well, and I've got to say, having a husband that works really hard, even later in life, because he was trained to work hard, is a huge blessing. For a wife. It's just a huge blessing. So I think that is so good. And I'm just so grateful, you guys, to have this information on video, because it's just such a good reminder for me, even with Leon. He's a year and a half, and just, oh, he's cute, instead of being like, oh, you're sweet, or like, oh, I love when you smile like that. Like just saying other things. You're helpful for mommy. And I know it's going to get more and more important as he gets older, but okay, how do you encourage siblings to get along? There were quite a few questions on this one.
And there were two different. One asked about sibling,
like adolescents getting along with younger kids.
Right. And so I think when children are younger, before I kind of like that idea. I wish I remembered what it was called, but how our brain is developed 0 to 6, and then 6 to 12, and 12 to 18. I think it's the classical education realm uses the...
I forget what it's called too. I'll link it down below if we can remember it.
Because I like that way of thinking, because I think it helps us as parents. Sometimes a 0 to 6-year-old, and we're flexible in there, we feel like we need to explain and reason with them. But all they really need is right and wrong, directions and training. And so in that fighting scenario with the siblings, it's a really good idea to get clarity, not to figure out who's right or wrong, but to simply look at the behavior, whether it's hitting, yelling, pulling hair, and to be able to stop and say, that's wrong behavior, it's bad behavior, and then take care of it accordingly. Punish whatever it does, just sinful behavior. And then as the children do grow into adolescence, it is a time where you're talking and you are explaining how God would have us behave. And you do want it when there will be conflict, and look at it as a blessing, because it's a way to learn to communicate in the safety of your home. And it's your opportunity as a parent to be able to talk. And so I think rather than, I don't know that I have a real good conflict resolution idea, because we just did a lot of talking. I think my advice or encouragement would be, just don't grow weary in well doing. You just will keep talking, and
don't get tired of doing the same thing.
It's really true, and it's a good thing. You're talking and showing them how to communicate, and then helping them to communicate with their siblings. And was there a question about adolescents interacting with younger ones?
Yes,
there was.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that to encourage then leadership in the older ones, that would be my first thought, and how they have sweet influence upon those younger ones, and quite honestly, most of the families that we've been around where the young ones come in, you see an automatic acceptance. There's just a natural love that they have for those new babies. And I just really think it's God's design, and you see it lived out, and they have such joy that those new siblings come in. And then again, for the younger ones to teach, to have them respect the older ones and their things, and there doesn't need to be any sharing or necessary. It just has to be, this is her, these are her things, and we don't touch them. I guess to simplify and not make things too complicated, we don't need to figure out why kids do things. They just will do naughty things because we have a sinful nature. And for us to be able to embrace that and train them to behave the right way. And then when they're old enough to communicate, just keep communicating with them. And prayer. Prayer is a big thing. I continue to pray now. And when I see conflict happening, and just to pray, because God's the one that softens our hearts and does that work in all of us.
That's good. That's encouraging. Okay, this is a real practical one. What are benchmark ages for children's chores?
Well, I don't know that I can really answer that very well.
What? You're supposed to tell me at 5 my kid empties the trash can.
I think as a general, it would probably be back to my philosophy of work, is that anytime, as soon as they're walking, to be able to work together and give direction. A lot of times, and throughout life, we've raised 10 children, or still raising, it's easy to get sidetracked on your own projects or expect them to do something on their own. But if we make the effort to do things together, I can guarantee success. It may be a little bit more challenging, but there will be success in the area of relationship and the chores. So having your children up beside you as soon as they can, working together, that's pretty much the only benchmark I could get and give. And that it's to be able to embrace chores as something that you work together. I think maybe sometimes we make the mistake that they can just go off and do it. And they can't. They need to be trained and taught. And I had little moments, or maybe they were big moments, but that I remember being annoyed. I forget if we had 4 children, and we were all living in a little trailer while we were building, and they were all sharing a bedroom. And I remember going in there and thinking, this is just always a wreck. It's always a mess. And at the time, I felt annoyed. But being able to step back and say, well, I haven't taught them how to keep their room orderly. And that idea of not to get annoyed or irritated with our children. We all know that, but I think for when we do get annoyed and irritated, to step back and ask why. Because we will get angry and irritated, but I think God will use that if we step back and ask, what's annoying me, or what's embarrassing me, what's to be able to step back and say, oh, their behavior was wrong. It's not an excuse to act out in anger, but it's actually a sign that we need to do some child training, and to be okay with that. That's our job, and not be frustrated with them, but simply, and not be frustrated with ourselves. No condemnation, but to be able to step back and say, okay, we've got work in this area. And honestly, sometimes it's a blessing not to be overwhelmed with how much there is to do, but think, well, good, you said something about job security. Oh, yeah. And we just have a job to do, and it's a full life.
So going along with that, did you guys develop chore charts? Do you have any advice for developing chore charts?
Inconsistently or seasonally. That's what I would probably say.
Okay.
Seasonally. And we gave the kids areas of the house to be in charge of. And even today, we've got 4 boys living at the house, and so the schedule they have is they each have a week of the month to keep their bathroom, laundry room clean, and so those are young adults.
Yeah.
But we did it with 6, 8, and 10-year-olds too, to take a section of the house, and they'd be in charge of that area, whether it was the living room, vacuuming, dusting. And then you'd switch it up, maybe after a month. I grew up switching things after a week. Okay. And I think I probably read somewhere it wasn't long enough for kids to kind of develop
like a system for it.
Yeah. And so we kept things probably longer than a month. And just because you develop this routine. And then we'd think, okay, we need to switch it up. And then cool. The other thing, too, one thing we have, the kitchen work, after meal cleanup, we try to get everybody to do that. That wasn't really one person's job. And so that would be a general thing that we did, and we were pretty consistent on that. I mean, maybe not consistent on when we changed it, but it worked for us.
Yeah, no, totally. That's good. That's a good guideline. Okay, so how did you raise boys? And I'm really curious about this one because Leanne's obviously really little, but there's already little things like I grew up as one of 8 girls. And I mean, there were 3 boys, but they were the minority. Like, they just weren't the priority in, like, what I remember.
Right.
And I am so grateful for Elisha. And I think you did a fantastic job. So I am curious, like, what are your tips for that?
Well, I think one of the biggest tips is paying attention to your husband. I think a lot of times, because he is a male and he was a boy, and I think maybe sometimes we disregard that as moms because we're the ones that are with them all of the time. And back to that simplifying again, when they're young, you can still do, I think, the black and white child training, except that they maybe are more active, black and white, not as complicated, quite honestly, as girls, I think. They're a little bit more simple-minded as when they're younger. I remember my dad.
When they're younger.
No, I think it's just that one track. What is it? They, women can think of all sorts of things.
And guys just focus on one thing at a time.
And you kind of can see that as little boys. And not to get frustrated with it, but to know that God made them a boy. So when you recognize those male-female differences, embrace that. Listen to your husband because you talk. Tell your husband your frustrations and discouragements, concerns, and he'll have good insight. Just being a guy. And what I felt like our conflict came when our firstborn, Joby, turned 12, 13, kind of jumped into the adolescence. And I literally felt like he was out to get me. That it was like this went from little boy, easy child training kind of, to like kind of defiant. I mean, he was annoyed with me. I would ask him to clean up the kitchen and I could feel a brush off. So I talked to Joe about it, and he told me, and I've read things since then, that young men are coming in, don't want a woman in charge of them. And so they really bristle
at that,
And so to be able, and I was really blessed, my husband said, just let me handle that. So, and then the second thing I did was not take it personally. For Joe to say, no, he's not out to get you. He's not. He loves you, and he still wants to please you, but he's having this conflict, and to believe that, and then to be able to take it to Joe. And it wasn't a thing like wait till your father gets home. It was it was more of I would sense things, and I just wouldn't approach him or confront him about it. I wouldn't be confrontational, and I would bring it to Joe and then have him do the confrontation, if that makes sense. And so embracing the maleness and being good with that. And then relying on husband and not taking things too personally.
No, I know, because Elisha has said things where he's like, I appreciate my mom so much and what she did for me. And he's like, I remember being just a jerk to her when I was a teenager, and I feel bad about it. And then I look at Leon and I'm like, is he going to be that way to me? But at the same time, you want them to embrace that masculinity, and I don't want a puppy dog son following me around, just waiting for mama to do everything for me either. So it's I don't know. There's gives and takes, I guess.
Well, it is, and having the dad involved, if that works, if a dad isn't involved, I think you could still apply, embrace the maleness and not take it personally. And you could do that same thing that I told you you're doing with toddlers, the right and wrong behavior, to say that was wrong to speak to mom that way. That's disrespectful and it's sinful. And I have, I said that Joe's done the confrontation. I have had confrontation. And especially as older kids, I'm able to say, wow, that this is not going to work in another relationship. What you just said to me was completely wrong and sinful. So you can be direct, but not think, well, I did anyway. I tended to want to get emotional and frustrated, and but to be just step back and.
That's good. And okay, so what about, this is just kind of my thing. If you have multiple boys and they're really young and they're just kind of bouncing off the walls, did you have anything that you did for them? Because you had 4 boys in a row there at the end.
Right.
What did you do for kind of the chaotic, crazy,
That's a really good question. I think free play outside is go outside. And whether it's raining or cold, I just think playing is a really good thing. And my kids still have good memories of building forts with each other. And I was talking to a young mom via Annie, was talking with her as well. And Annie said, well, my mom would just make us go out and play. This mom has been pretty intense with her schooling. She's very good. She's actually very attentive and intensive with her child training and schooling. But Annie said, you just need to make them go outside and play, so you don't feel like you're so burdened. She says, that's what my mom made us do. And of course, I felt a little bit bad about that. But there are studies right now, right now that are encouraging, current studies, encouraging parents to let their children have unstructured play. Yeah. And especially outside.
Well, that's when you get that creativity, I feel like, and your imagination and problem solving and all that.
Right.
I mean, it helps.
Right. And I think the screen time. I mean, I say just say no to screen time, period. And that doesn't mean they'll never have it. But if you can say no, then you've got the little exceptions to the rules, because screens will come in. Yeah. They just are here. I mean, we're talking to a screen.
Yeah, and, exactly. We're here to stay.
Yeah, and but to be able to have a really good foundation in your home of as much as possible, no screen time. And for us, it was video and DVD. It was Walt Disney movies. It was seemingly good things, which, I mean, they are fun things. But one thing we noticed that if they're sedate and watching a movie, and then once that movie was over, you'd see a direct correlation between hyperactivity, aggressive behavior, and that was a gift to be able to see that so clearly, and thinking, not that we never did movies, but if you fall into that, back off as much as you can and encourage, and it will be difficult, almost like withdrawal. There might be lots of fighting, lots of aggressive behavior to start off with if you're already doing a lot of screen time. But man, that's a big one. I'd really encourage you to consider and let kids be active, engage with people.
Good. Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's encouraging how you say there might be a withdrawal or something, like, because I think it'd be easy to okay, we're going back to the screens now, instead of being okay, this is normal.
It is, yeah.
Get through the process.
Yeah, and there are times, I mean, we do it even now. There's been really a lot of things going on in our family these last few months, and we've taken care of grandchildren, and we've watched Clifford the Big Red Dog. I mean, we have those times where the video has been a babysitter. Yes. So I'm no condemnation. We all have our different gauges, but I think to try to shoot for no screens.
Well, I liked what you were saying, in that it could be actually more helpful in eliminating arguments or sibling rivalry or aggressiveness or hyperactivity.
There's a direct correlation.
So I like that, because I think that's something I can tell myself, instead of being it'd be well, there is going to be a negative consequence. I'll buy this time now. Yes. But there is going to be a negative consequence that I'm going to have to deal with. Yeah. Instead of just seeing it as I get off scotch-free.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So that's good. Okay, all your kids play musical instruments. They still play musical instruments. Elisha's still in a family band. They do Christmas concerts in December and just several times throughout the year. So someone had a question, and that is, what age do you encourage piano lessons? What age did they start?
Oh, I like this question because it was so cool the way all 10 did it differently. Yeah, so when Joby was, actually when he was born, in our church, we had a great piano teacher, and I joked to the piano teacher, I said, can we put Joby on your waiting list? And at the time, I wasn't necessarily thinking musician. I thought this will be part of discipline. I had wished that I had the discipline growing up, because I sing, but I don't have musical knowledge. And I thought, growing up, being participating in musical groups, I saw where I lacked in the musical knowledge and theory, and I thought I want to be able to give that to my kids. So piano lessons just seemed like something I could give to my kids. And then as Liddy, so they were this piano teacher recommended that he be 8 years old. The size of their hands, the way they could receive lessons, and then also you have less as time has gone on too. The older a child is starting an instrument, the less oversight a parent needs to give.
That makes sense.
That being said, though, then we had younger kids. We've had 4 to 6 year olds begin stringed instruments, but we had teachers living in our home. The siblings were teaching. And as I've been working with parents now, and encouraging them in the whole lesson thing, you can start lessons younger. You're older. They can be 4 to 6, especially with the stringed instruments, the violin and fiddle. But there will be more parent-intensive time. That children just will not go off and practice on their own. Some may, but very rarely. But I don't see this as a negative thing. You have to consider your time before you jump into that. But it's that thing again of a relationship builder. When you're sitting next to a child during their 15-minute practice time each day, you're building a relationship. You're encouraging them, and just your presence. That's a really big deal. And it kind of relates to the interest and talent and gifting. Another thing that parents might say is, my child's just not interested. Well, I don't think that we can say that. Again, most children aren't interested in things that are hard. And none of us are.
Good point. Like, I am not musical, Mom.
And so I've looked at being able to give our children music lessons and expose them to good things as a gift that I can give my child, because there will come a time when they aren't in my home and they won't take music lessons. But while they're in our home and we could afford it, we did music lessons because we can. And they may develop an interest later, but regardless, learning an instrument and having that discipline is a good thing. And you can, I used to say, well, if you make your kids, in fact, Elisha's written a really good article on his blog.
Oh, yeah. Now that I'm a father.
Now that I'm a father, on music practice, but on how, again, we can make things so complicated, but we teach our children to brush our teeth or learn to read. We can do the same thing with instruments. We can expect 15 minutes practice a day when they're little, and then increase that up. It's a good thing, I think, to be able to encourage that, and don't fall back on your 6-year-old not being interested, or your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old. They might not be, but just keep at it. Just like you would make them make their bed, even if they didn't want to. Make them practice their violin.
I really like how you have those big picture. Like, all of these questions, I feel like you just have such a big picture. And it's not, do our kids actually need to learn the piano or not, or learn the fiddle or not? It's like, it builds relationship, it builds discipline. Like, I feel like you've seen all these things as tools instead of just looking at the actual activity itself, seeing the bigger picture.
Right.
Which I think is super encouraging. And also, I will say this, like, you made your kids stick with piano through high school. Right? Like, Elisha did not like to play the piano. He loves guitar and mandolin, and he still plays his fiddle. So I think that's interesting, too. Like, he was able to experiment with other instruments, and you just made him stick it out long enough for him to see, okay, I do have a love for this, and I don't like this. Right.
And honestly, we could have saved money if we would have let him quit. Because it's not like we were benefiting a whole lot. I mean, we had really good teachers. And so we could have saved money. We could have saved the conflict, giving in. But I think it was probably at the time, and I still feel this way, like it wasn't torture. We knew it wasn't we had a clear conscience. It was all a good experience. It just was that he didn't like it. And we just felt like, well, this is something we're going to do, just like you would commit to, your higher math through high school. Some people. Or,
that was just definitely not me.
Yeah. So, and again, because we could, we did.
Yeah.
Some people have to make different choices. But in our family, we were able to do that.
That's good. Okay, so we have 2 more questions, and I think they're really, really good. One of them was asked by a family friend. She's hilarious, Stacy. She said, "How are you such a babe?" And I am going to translate that because Lisa is. But how do you maintain your health and fitness? You've had 10 kids. You've never let yourself go. Like, what do you do to maintain that?
Oh, I love to exercise, so movement has been just a real blessing to me. I love to move and sweat. So anywhere from walking to running. And now I participate in classes at my gym. There have been different things throughout the years, because there have been periods where I didn't feel like going out and moving. And I sort of just fell into it kind of accidentally. I didn't realize how immobile I'd become. And the last 2 years, God's really encouraged me. I jumped back into classes. I'm encouraged with the fellowship of the other ladies at this point in my life. And I still treasure walking on my road and or running. I hope to run again because I love to run. I look at these times. I do love to move. I know some people don't like it, so that's a kind of maybe a natural thing for me. But there are some parts of exercise that aren't natural, like weightlifting and strength, and I've made myself do that because I know it's a healthy, good thing. I want to be strong. I think the biggest challenge for me has been the eating, and nobody really asked that, but I'm going to go ahead and share because it's been such a personal testimony for me, and having me be healthy and to really ask the Lord, because when I quit having babies and all my body changed.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yes, that changed, and then circumstances outside changed, so I had a lot more emotional challenges or different emotional challenges than I'd had before that kind of blindsided me. So I was eating emotionally, and it's been a real cool journey to be able to seek the Lord through this and want to go to the Lord for my satisfaction and direction. I would go to food thinking, this will be the answer.
It's funny how it's so easy to do that.
Yeah, or my comfort.
It makes me feel good right now.
Because it's true. It does feel good.
Does.
It's right there. But the consequences are, and especially at my age right now, and looking to the future, and the people that have gone before me and where their health is at, whether it's diabetes, different health conditions that come because of our bad habits. And so I feel like the Lord has really encouraged me. It's not been an easy battle for me, but it's been a good one. Really relying on the Lord and being directed. So it's been a really good year health-wise for me, and losing weight, and I still have more to go, but I'm encouraged with the journey.
Yeah. And she makes really good food. That's good for you too, which is a blessing. I had her send me some salad recipes and stuff like that, because there are ways to make food taste really good and have it be a blessing.
Yeah, and so I just I want to continue to pursue that health. It's like I said, the moving part came naturally. The eating part's more of a challenge, but that doesn't mean, just in all this child training, that doesn't, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not
Lisa
right.
does it if it's hard. She doesn't care.
So it is hard, but I have to persevere, and the Lord's been gracious with me. So.
That's so good. That's a big encouragement. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's going to encourage a lot of women. So our last question here is, were you ever scared to have kids? I mean, you had a lot. When did you decide you wanted to have a lot? Was that a decision?
Well, I did. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and so I thought a lot then would be 7. One more type of a thing.
I feel like that's a lot.
And Joe jokes about, I did want a lot of children when I got married, and at that time, I thought it might be 7. And Joe, when people ask Joe, my husband, if he wanted a lot of kids, he said he never really thought about it, but he would marry me. He wanted to do whatever it took to marry me, and so if I wanted a lot of kids, he wanted a lot of kids. So he's been a good sport from the very beginning and embraced that. And I think as we just decided to and really believed that children were a blessing, I think that I mean, the numbers, they just grew. I did get a little nervous when I found out we were pregnant with the 10th because it was double digits, and I felt like, wow, that's just like a hillbilly. And
I'm reverting to like the freak show segment of humanity.
And I mentioned that we live in the same community where we grew up, so even just going to the hairstylist and I'm pregnant again, wondering what that would sound like, look like. Those, even though we were embracing each child, I'd get a little nervous about what other people might think. And I feel like we were really blessed when I was super nervous about that 10th, hearing comments from people saying, we were wondering when you were going to have another one. We were waiting for this, thinking, maybe people...
Glad I didn't let you down.
Realizing two things, that that people really don't think that much about you, like they might, and regardless, it doesn't really matter what they think anyway. But that also brings back the fact that we believe that they're a blessing. Joe and I purpose to try to make our children a blessing. If we believe that they're a blessing, let's make sure that they bless others' lives. And it started with their parents, their grandparents, and then others around, which would indicate good manner, trying to teach the good manners, good behavior. If we believe they're a blessing, then we want them to truly bless others. And so that's a foundation.
I love that concept. Like, I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
But there are some kids you see, that the Bible says they're a blessing, but you're just like, that kid's not blessing his parents right now.
Yeah.
And
true,
so that's good to just be like, let's make him a blessing.
Yeah. And I think that was our motivation, that maybe can be our motivation for raising good kids. I mean, ultimately, we want our kids to love and know God, and not be our purpose to have it be a moralistic, legalistic situation. But there are good reasons to teach your kids good manners and good character, just to interact and truly bless others. So
that's good.
And that's been a motivation also for the music.
Oh,
that grew, and coming back to that again, we started with just a discipline of music, but then the way we began performing was I sang, and so I had them, when we sang at home all the time, we'd sing hymns and sing together, and so then we started singing at church together, and so that's how that sort of evolved. And then the people that came into our lives to show us how to make instruments work together. I didn't know how to make that work, and I didn't even know how to teach my kids how to sing in parts. All I knew was melody. And so
cool.
We just had a lot of good influence in our lives.
That's so awesome. Well, I feel like I really got to know you a little bit better through this, and I also feel like I got some major nuggets of just like, I love the way you think, and it's really encouraging to, I don't know, I'm like really emotional right now. But it's just really encouraging, because motherhood is one of those things that you don't really know this stuff until your mom, and even though my kids are really little, just like these concepts and these mindsets are so encouraging to me, and I just want to have them for my kids. Anyways, so thank you so much.
Yeah, it was fun.
I really enjoyed it. We're going to get out of these like uncomfortable chairs. We've been like propping ourselves up in here.
Trying to practice good posture.
Yeah, I know.
So good. Yeah.
Every once in a while, we'd straighten up. So anyways, thank you so much, Lisa. You guys give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate Lisa taking the time to think through these answers, to write them down, and to bless all of us. So anyways, I hope you guys have an awesome week, and we will see you soon.